I'm Glenn McGinnis, and this is Outburst. This week, should a COVID-19 vaccine be mandatory?
No, I don't believe it should be.
For essential work, yes.
Herd immunity doesn't work when something is as aggressive as COVID-19.
I think they should be mandatory. Obviously, it's the only way we're going to get out of this. Do we want another plague?
But first, as Parliament resumes for 2021 and a new year begins, many of us are hopeful that things will somehow be better than they were in 2020. But with so much uncertainty in the weeks and months to come, the work done by our MPs could be more important than ever. So, what would you like to see get done? Our question.
What are you hoping Parliament will accomplish in 2021?
I'm hoping this year that the federal government will roll out universal pharmacare. In a minority government situation, in the past, in my lifetime, that's what brought Medicare. Minority government situation brought Medicare. Same situation now. Let's have universal pharmacare.
Well, I guess the leadership in the COVID-19 to continue the way it is, and perhaps helping the provincial governments as far as the homelessness issue is concerned.
And I think the key is if we have a legal drug supply by prescription rather than continuing this formula of incarceration that doesn't work. Even the Vancouver mayor has called for a legal drug supply. If we can get the Chinese-produced fentanyl out of the equation, we stop having 16,000 Canadians die in 4 years and 5,000 in our province alone in the same time frame.
I hope that they deal with the COVID-19 situation in a more sane manner. I think that there's a lot of fear-mongering going on, kind of jumping all over, but even recently, a lot of the politicians were found traveling to lovely Hawaiian spots to drink their pina coladas, while everyone's terrified to go across the street to visit their grandma. So I have a problem with that. So I'm hoping that they deal with the COVID situation better.
We need factories. We need the government to get out of the way and make sure that we develop hemp industry, copper industry. We produce food because we should eat the food that grows in this country is big enough to grow chicken and pig and milk. And that's what I wish any and every government would do. None of them does.
I'm hoping that they are going to get really consistent and really upfront with the provinces, and let's get some proper testing at all the airports, and let's get really clear on what works and where it's worked in Canada, and follow like Bonnie Henry or whoever's got something really good going. Let's get Canadian about it. Let's stop, and let's put the science first, and that's what I'm hoping as of number one.
There's a number of issues, but I guess the main one is the cost for the COVID and stuff. As far as we've got to pay for it eventually, so it's there's got to be a give and take to come with it.
I hope to get the vaccine on time. I hope we can get this economy going, and I hope that everybody will support what's going on. It's very important.
This has never been tried anywhere. 39 million people in Canada, maybe. Vaccinating them all. This is a huge undertaking.
And maybe it'd be nice to have our own vaccines produced in our own country. Because we don't, I'm not saying we should be nationalistic or anything like that, but I think there are certain things that help our whole country that are necessary. With cooperation, we have to do some things for ourselves, and vaccines are one.
I don't give it any thought. I let them do their thing. They're a minority government. They probably just want to survive. What do I expect them to do? Try to survive?
Try and beat down the debt. I think the government handed out way too much money. I even talked to my mother about the $300 she got. And she said, why did they send it to me? I don't need it. nothing against seniors at all, but they were the least impacted financially by COVID.
Well, I guess I'm hoping Parliament will continue to support the vaccine rollouts across Canada, continue to support stimulus, kind of keep the economy going.
I don't really see much anyways. I'm a hard worker, so I just work as much as I can to support my family, and I don't really see much change as the government does. You can be liberal, you can be conservative. I don't see it. I just work every day and go to work, so I'm grateful to be proud Canadian, and I think that's all you should ask for. I don't need to add anything asked for the government to do. They'll do what they want anyway, so I just keep moving forward, working, and that's it. Like I don't really need much for the government to ask for them, so.
I mean, I think they're doing a pretty good job, but I hope they keep it together and just try to get those vaccines going, because we don't produce them, so we have to get them from somewhere. So hopefully we, work on our pharma-tech industry so we can actually get something for the next time something bad happens, instead of just waiting for the world to kind of get something going and then buying it, you know what I mean?
Probably getting the economy kind of working out a bit better again, but probably more in line with getting the provinces working together a bit better. Because right now I think that's where the biggest problem is. The provinces aren't really cooperating too closely, or at least they don't really have everything together in the same way. Like Quebec being completely closed down makes things harder in Ottawa because everyone floods to Ottawa to do stuff anyways. So getting that kind of wrapped together. The environment definitely always an important piece as well. But I think right now getting us kind of tackling the whole global situation right now will probably be the biggest priority this year.
Wow, get us through the pandemic with everyone, most people safe and hopefully not too broke.
For almost a year now, the coronavirus has been the main focus for all levels of government in Canada, and it's proven to be an enormous challenge. But before the pandemic, there were many other important matters which now may have taken a back seat to COVID-19. So we took to the streets with this question.
What other issues have been overlooked due to COVID-19?
I don't know whether it's overlooked or whether we've realized that everybody has a contribution to make to the economy, from, nurses and physicians, the medical staff, but, people who work at Sobeys and Superstore, and the hairdressers, and people who do the turnarounds, the rotational workers. So we should be more cognizant of the fact that it hurts some people. If you're, like we are, retired and depend on our income and things that we've invested over the years, it doesn't hurt us as much, but it hurts a lot of people, and those are the ones that I feel the most empathy for.
The economic ramifications of having a huge public debt. I don't know if you're going to sit there and ponder about it, but it's going to have long-term ramifications. They never saw it coming, and they didn't know how much you're going to spend, and now that it's out there, who's going to pay for it? I mean, I'm pretty old, so it's going to be the generation behind me. They don't realize it, but they're going to. It'll stop some things that were probably going to go ahead. That's the part that I don't think is out there.
Climate change, that's a big one. And now, of course, it'll be, we don't have the money to do anything about it because of COVID. So it's going to be a convenient excuse for not putting money where we need to.
The environment, of course, and employment. Businesses, small businesses that are struggling. I think that should be the focus, the prime focus. Employment.
It's not overlooked, but because of the small business closures, we're seeing a lot of places just permanently shut down. And I don't know if they're still doing those $40,000 loans, but if they're not, they should really keep doing that and make sure that small businesses can keep moving, so it's not just Walmart at the end of this. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I guess I'm not seeing a lot of meaningful change when it comes to reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. You know, I hear a lot of talk about it. I don't see a lot of concrete action. So I think that's kind of taken a back burner.
I think the government's trying to get as many as they can going properly, but there's too much interference and opposition from some of the other parties to make it work properly. They should fall in line and help, not criticize.
Yeah, there's nothing. I guess that's the main item on everybody's agenda right now. So anything else would be secondary.
There's probably things that are being overlooked. I'm not really sure, but they're pretty much primarily focused on COVID. So it's kind of hard for them to do everything at once, I would say. There's only so much you can do.
Yeah, I've heard people with like disabilities, like with blindness or deafness, have been struggling a lot and have been kind of overlooked by the government because they're not really sure how to like help them deal with COVID and social distancing when they face those disabilities as well.
The federal government, I think they're overlooking sanity. They're overlooking the fact there is no science to defend their position that we have to stay indoors. This masking, and I think that they're overlooking the fact that people are starting to cotton on to what's really going on. It's actually a globalist attempt to take over all of our cultures to do this globalist agenda, and I'm against that.
Yeah, I think that you might call it domestic violence, but I think women in rough positions, support for mothers, single moms, and women at home and women in difficult situations, I think they always come out last, and the same thing's happening with the pandemic. And I want the federal government and the provincial government to really bring up their awareness on that.
I don't know if anything is being overlooked, but I operate an income tax preparation business. And so much of what the federal response has been back of the envelope sort of stuff. It hasn't been thought through. Just yesterday I was looking at some of my clients who are brain injured people. And half a dozen of them had applied for the CERB. None of them were eligible, but they got it paid. Now they're going to have a massive debt they'll probably never get out of. So a little more thought, less back of the envelope would certainly work.
I think the pandemic has sometimes given us a kind of easy out on issues that are outstanding and have been there before the plague and will be there after the plague. Things like post-secondary education, where we have fallen into the trap of like really relying on international education to fund our post-secondary education. Well, in the olden days, Mr. Pearson said we should have public education, meaning funded by public money. Well, yabba dabba doo, here's our opportunity. Let's do that.
In which city was Terry Fox born? Winnipeg, Calgary, or Vancouver?
Oh, I'm gonna guess Winnipeg.
Calgary. He's born in, I think it's, I'm not sure, but I'm going to have to go with Winnipeg.
If I was to guess, probably would say Vancouver.
I want to say Winnipeg.
Vancouver. Winnipeg.
The answer? Winnipeg.
Oh! That was a total guess.
You guys are brilliant.
Thanks.
Terry Fox was born on July 28, 1958 in Winnipeg, Manitoba. His family later settled in Port Coquitlam, BC. When he was 18, Fox was diagnosed with cancer, which resulted in him losing his right leg. Undeterred by his situation, in April 1980, he embarked on his Marathon of Hope, a cross-country coast-to-coast run to raise money for cancer research. Beginning with little fanfare in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, Terry Fox ran roughly the equivalent of a marathon every single day through the Atlantic provinces, Quebec, and much of Ontario, relying on his prosthetic leg. Sadly, after 143 days and 5,373 kilometers, on September 1st, 1980, his Marathon of Hope came to an early end near Thunder Bay, Ontario, after his cancer returned. Terry Fox died on June 28, 1981, but his life has left a profound mark on the Canadian fabric.
Statistics Canada has suggested that Canada's poverty rate has actually seen a slight decline in recent years. But despite that, millions of Canadians still live below the poverty line in every region of this country, especially in some remote Indigenous communities. But a pandemic can exacerbate the effects of poverty for those who have nowhere else to turn, especially in the dead of winter. So, what can we do to make things better? Our question.
What are your ideas to reduce poverty in Canada?
Subsidized housing is probably the first thing. There's this, I've heard experts say that the housing first is a kind of strategy that has proven to be effective in reducing poverty and helping people get back on their feet in a sustainable way.
Like more community like space, not just about jobs, but you feel less poor when you can have access to a lot of things. So that helps your mental health as well. So like poverty for me, it's when you're not being a part of the society because you don't have all the needs, you know?
Right.
So it's more like,
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think the taxation here there's a range for people in the middle class there's not a lot of incentive for them to earn more at a certain point because it's difficult for them to get ahead. So I don't know what the right formula is, but I think that's one of the things that's holding some people back.
I read something recently I'm not sure if it was Iceland or Sweden, that everybody will have a place to live. They basically eliminated homelessness. Now, I'm sure there was a bit of a cost to it, but when you think of the cost of not having them somewhere where perhaps they've got easier access to health care, that kind of thing, I think it's not a bad thing to look into.
Well, I mean, there's been poverty since time began. You know, it's like saying reduce the jobless rate. Depends which people, the poor people you're talking to. I mean, if you've got the homeless people, you've got a lot of drug addiction, and they're not just unemployed. So you know, it depends who you're going to tackle and do it.
I don't think anybody who's unemployed wants to be unemployed. And so maybe a basic living, I won't say living wage, but even a supplement to what you earn, however you earn it.
I think a great way for us to maybe reduce poverty in Canada is we take a look at families and individuals that are in a lower tax bracket and provide programs for their children and also programs for their parents to learn tools so they can get a job where it's higher pay and they can then benefit our society, their community, and the bottom line, their family better.
I mean, the poverty groups are the people that are homeless, the people that have nothing, and the people that have aren't giving down to the people that have not frequently enough or at all in some cases, because there's this fear, this panic that there's going to be nothing left for me, so I better hang on to what I got. The solution is not to hang on to what you got. The solution is to give it away. The only way you can have a sense of community and end poverty is to address it in a better way than we are right now.
As far as the government dealing with the poverty situation in our country, I live like 2 blocks from Beacon Hill Park. And I visited the people in the park on Christmas Eve just to give them I felt embarrassed. I got them these little gifts so they had something to open on Christmas Eve or the morning. And I was horrified to see people are sitting on the ground in pup tents that are meant for children. There's no excuse for that to happen in our city anywhere in Canada. We shouldn't be sending our money overseas to help people when we can't help our own local citizens.
I think they gotta give more insight on the homeless people who are on the streets and more living quarters. I mean, there's a lot of empty spaces around Victoria just sitting there, and I think the government's got to look into that and go, okay, we've got to look at them as well, because they are people who at one time were somebody and just lost their way.
Reduction of poverty, again, we need the guaranteed annual income We saw what that phony populist has done in Ontario, the last living one of the Ford brothers. He threw it out before they can even measure the beneficial effects of it. Studies show that when people are given that guaranteed annual income, they don't go spend it on drugs, they spend it on rent and getting themselves ready for work. So that's what we need, particularly the guaranteed annual income, if we're going to be serious about getting rid of poverty. And next to the United States, of the industrialized countries, we have the highest rate of poverty. It's shameful.
If you put them to work in factories, poverty will go away. Excuse me, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even in the 80s, there was no homeless people on the street. There was no tent city in Toronto, because I could rent a room for $50 a week and take home at least $250 a week, because there was work. In the lumberyard, in a massive Ferguson factory, we had Goodyear factories, we had every kind of factories. We went to work, production. Now, we sit here and wait for the boat from China to bring us a pair of shoes, because if Chinese boats stopped coming, we would go around barefoot and naked, because don't even have Canadian underwear.
While the vaccine rollout has begun, we still see a dramatic hike in COVID cases across the country. But as more Canadians get vaccinated, the hope is those case numbers will drop. But even though we are encouraged to get it, there will be some that refuse to take the vaccine. But some feel it should be compulsory, especially when it comes to travel. So we took this question to you.
Should a COVID-19 vaccine be mandatory?
No, I think it should be up to the individual, but it would be, there's definitely the more vulnerable people need to have that. So maybe in that regard, I would say maybe people over 65, because the hospitals are, there's other people that are sick with heart disease and cancer that should be looked after also.
I don't think it should be mandatory, because everyone kind of has their own choice, but I think it should be encouraged.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that it's mandatory for certain countries. Like if you're going into a different country, they could say it's mandatory that you have the vaccine, but
you can't really force people to get a vaccine if they don't want it.
Yeah.
My opinion on the vaccinations is they should not be made mandatory. They should not be mandatory. We have a right as Canadian citizens to decide what's going to go into our bodies, and I personally will not allow them to force me to take that vaccine. I'd rather go to jail than take a mandatory vaccine.
Should the vaccine be mandatory? I think it should be if you want to participate in society. If you want to live in your cottage out at the lake and not go anywhere, including the local store, sure. But your anti-vax thoughts shouldn't put the rest of the population at risk.
I think they should be mandatory. Obviously, it's the only way we're going to get out of this. Do we want another plague? Do we want to be locked down? Do we want our restaurants and hospitality businesses and the ability for people to visit to be extinct?
No, I don't believe it should be. There's going to be, I certainly myself will take it, whether I take the first one or not. I think there'll be a number of different vaccines that come out over the course of the next 6 months to 2 years, and not necessarily the first one is going to be the most efficient. So I believe it's up to each individual's decision, but as long as priority is given to those that require it the most is the most important factor.
Yeah, I believe it should be. It's very important that everybody takes that so that it can do good for everybody. Anybody who wouldn't take it is silly.
Again, that's a scientific question. If it's not given to everybody, then it might put all the people that have had the vaccine again at risk. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not a scientist or a doctor. And I think the decision should be made by them.
I'm a nurse, was a nurse. I'm very strong vaccination. Mandatory for essential work, yes. And you can't give it to somebody who's either has some underlying immunosuppressed condition. But I think yes, in all, without certain exemptions, but not a very saying, well, I don't believe in vaccinations. That's not good enough for me. I'm sorry. Your kid has to get vaccinations to go to school. So, yeah.
Even the United States would propose that you don't have to get one or you do get one. So it's really not an issue. It's like saying, do you think the sun will come out tomorrow? I think it is. And I don't think anybody's going to make it mandatory.
Hell yes. Those no maskers, I'm sorry. Go live in the woods. I don't care. I got no use for you. If you're that selfish, maybe they'll be the same ones that don't want to take the vaccine. But if everybody else takes it and they get sick, oh well.
I'd say yes. A lot of people kind of disagree with the vaccine, but then again, herd immunity doesn't work when something is as aggressive as COVID-19. You need to get people immune not through being exposed, at least to an active virus. With things like the flu, it works okay, but there's still lots of deaths from the flu, and COVID-19 is worse than that. So best to kind of nip it in the bud, as it were, I suppose. Then again, though, it's difficult to force something like a vaccine on people because we are talking about their bodies. So I think making it more restricting activities based on it, restricting travel, things like that, could probably go a bit of a better way than requiring everyone have a vaccine be put into them. I'm fine with it, but not everybody is, and I know that. It's not safe for everybody either.
I would say yes. It sounds a little like totalitarian, but it's if a bunch of people just keep getting COVID and spreading it and recreating the virus in new ways, like keep on mutating it by spreading it, we're never going to solve it because it'll out-mutate our vaccines. So, yeah, I think it should be mandatory.
I don't see the state forcing you to get an inoculation, but I think it is reasonable to prohibit certain access if you can't demonstrate that you've been vaccinated. So I think it could be a prerequisite to, for example, getting on a plane or going to a hockey game. That's a reasonable thing to me.
Thanks for watching this episode of Outburst on the Cable Public Affairs channel. I'm Glenn McGuinness. If you have any comments about this show or any other show, you can find us on social media. You can also find us on our website at www.cpac.ca. It's your turn to speak up, and we're listening.